I really believe that a depth psychological perspective can help us as individuals to not get completely overwhelmed by fear, helplessness, outrage, and maybe preserve some kind of freedom in order to take some action, even on a small local level in response to what's happening in the world. So it's good timing, and I'm glad to have you back to speak mainly about your book, Psychological Citizenship and Democracy, which addresses all of this stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And as in our previous discussions, the reason that I chose to write it now was that I think Hillman really has something that is worth listening to with regard to what we can do. And that, well, look, all the guardrails have fallen away. Um, the courts have given way, our media has given way, our business have given way, especially AI. All the traditional safeguards for the American democracy have pretty much acquiesced to the Trump administration. And I think it's important that we see the Trump administration. I mean that by not only the president, but his cabinet, the uh, 2025 manifesto that they're following, all these things as a piece, as symptoms of the end of the American empire. They brought about by neoliberalism and ultimately having to do with what Hillman calls an economic unconscious. That the way we make sense of everything is in terms of profit, loss, everything becomes transactional. And of course, Trump as president is the epitome of this. He's a real estate guy. It's always the art of the deal. That means
Mm.
there's no sense making that's other than the transactional. And that has, proven deadly for us. And that's what he's doing now. He's constantly making deals. And of course, they don't work out very well, as his business career demonstrates. But, where was he most successful? As a TV star, with outrage, firing people. There was that kind of enthusiasm that people liked. Finally, there was something that was decisive, but it's decisive in all the wrong ways. I think Bernie Sanders is right when he says Trump definitely identified the problems, but all of his solutions are the wrong ones.
Mm. Hmm.
Well, where are we left? We're left with the demos, the people, the citizens, we the people. And in a democracy, the people's power is through being citizens. And that's what really the book is ultimately about. How do we become better citizens, or what Hillman calls psychological citizens? And what's significant here is that citizenship really is dependent upon a sense of the common good. Unfortunately, the dominant kind of self that we are in the West today is this highly individualistic, atomistic, self-contained kind of individual, which is, as we've talked about, this is definitely an anomaly when we look across, different cultures and even Western history. But this kind of self makes the common good into a compromise. I give a little, you give a little, and that compromise never really works out. The alternative, and this is the kind of self that people have been most often in history, and there's many, many varieties of it, but a kind of relational self, where one understands oneself in one's relatedness to others, to the world itself, that we're a field of relations. And that kind of self, the common good can be fulfilling. It can be something that we desire because our humanity is connected with the humanity of others and the well being of the world as a whole. So, this is the important shift in being a different kind of self than we are today, I think, is the critical psychological moment that we need to pursue. And this is something I get from Sheldon Wolin and other people, that to be a Democrat is really to change oneself instead of self interest, communal interest. And this is where Hillman comes in. Now, in order to really grasp this, I think we have to realize there's not this thing like human nature that's been, universal, timeless, that human beings are always individuals, but there's different ways of being individuals. There's different varieties of it, different kinds of individuals. And this self-contained individual that we have, and the car is a great example of this, and the things in our world reflect back who we are to be. So thinking about the car, there's firm self-other boundaries. It's outside my car is not me, inside's me. So everything that's important becomes me. It's an internal locus of control. This exclusionary internal locus of control is competitive, my place in traffic. And so we're all set as competitors against one another for our own, I want to get there quicker. That's really a very dangerous kind of self that we have. And of course, the car has given rise to tremendous ecological problems, and we didn't have to go that way. We really didn't. I remember my dad telling me when he was growing up as a kid in Chicago, you could take electric streetcars anywhere in the city. Nobody had cars. But that all got changed because of financial interest. Again, that economic unconscious. That's the reason we make our decisions, economic benefit or economic loss. When you look on the other side, that relational kind of self, that kind of self, which we have in many, in your country, and First Peoples and Native peoples all over the world, there's a sense of belonging to a larger whole and being connected. And so that something that's detrimental to one part of our world is detrimental to us. And so this is where we come into why I think Hillman's notion of the psychological citizen that comes out of understanding therapy as a cell of revolution is important.
Mhm. Yeah. So for Hillman, the therapy room could be a place where we start to bring in some of these ideas about the collective self, the relational self, um, identifying the common good, like the higher values that we all feel are most important beyond the economic.
Right. Um, when you think about it, psychology does not have power in the world. We can't change the material or the economic structure of the world, and those things need to shift. I mean, the control by the oligarchy, the 1%, that's got to be challenged. But that's not what psychology can do. But psychology is the one who helps us understand what it is to be a human being, what kind of self to be. And in the course of therapy, one has the opportunity to help people see their connectedness to others and to the world and to value it. And when you are that kind of relational self, it's an erotic connection. There's eros there because it's part of me. My connections with others are not transactional profit loss. They're connections that are out of love. And love as Eros as connection. I'm not talking about just affection. I like this or I like that, but they're deeply part of who I am. And when that kind of understanding is inculcated in therapy, there's a shift then towards being more relational. And this is what I think Hillman is trying to get at when he talks about the self as the interiorization of community that's informed by what Alfred Adler called uh, social interest. And that social interest is really, it's an innate capacity to care about the larger good. It's informed by the perfection of humanity, always a goal never to be achieved, but always something that you're moving towards. Um, it's as Randy Severson, who's written about this, talks about. It's a rhetorical trope. It's a way of thinking about and being a human being, engaging, that works towards higher values, things of greater importance. That's the realm that Hillman calls the archetypal. And as we go forward, I think one of the things that's important to appreciate about Hillman is he uses archetypal as an adjective. He's not talking about archetypes as things in themselves, but there's certain kinds of meaning which have deep resonance, importance regarding what it is to be a human being. That's the archetypal realm, the extraordinary dimensions of our experience in which we really find our humanity. So, this cultivation of a relational self that's directed towards that dimension of our experience is something that can be done in psychotherapy. It's where psychology can contribute, not only in psychotherapy, but also, I think, in the public domain. One of the things that I valued about Hillman is he was a public intellectual. He spoke to the general public. He wrote things that were accessible to a lot of people. Um, and that's another important role that psychology can play. But again, the focus is going to be on how do we understand what it means to be a human being? And ultimately, that's a political question. Because if the self is how we understand the individual within a particular cultural historical context, our powers, our prohibitions, inclusive of our moral understandings, that's what's decided in the polis. And by the polis, we don't mean political in a narrow sense, but the polis says the human context. When Aristotle says that, and Hillman loves to quote this, that we're by nature political, he means that the foundation for our taking up our humanity is in the communal context, the way things have been decided, and over time regarding how we can best be a human being. And we have a faulty understanding of that in the world today, with this transactional view, this economic unconscious, this heroic ego, self-containment. It pits us all one against another in a way that is profoundly destructive of people and planet.
Mhm.
So cultivating this relational kind of self where we're erotically connected to the world. There's an engagement. Things matter to us. And that's the first moment, I think, in like four parts of Hillman's notion of uh, therapy as a cell of revolution. And again, this is what we can do. We can be uh, more relational. We can engage with people more. We can see ourselves as our connectedness. And then evaluating this, our responses when you're connected and you're up, there's a qualitative connection instead of the quantitative transactional view that we have today. We have a different kind of engagement. That's what Hillman calls the aesthetic response. And it's qualitative instead of quantitative. It's value oriented instead of transactional. It is moral instead of economic. And in this kind of engagement, we can evaluate things because he always says that this appreciation of the presence of things, their what kindedness as we engage with them, always has an inherent judgment. We're drawn towards beauty, we're repelled by ugliness. We're motivated to protest injustice and we admire justice. And along with that, in this kind of engagement, there's an involvement. And that's what Hillman means by destiny. That's how we're called to be within this context, which we're calling the political.